The Dunwell Report continues.
We're talking about energy and national security with our two guests who represent organizations called CNA and PSA. And Matthew, I want to get to this issue of other kinds of fuel and that sort of thing, but let's deal with one right here in Montana. We've got this vast reserve of coal sitting out in eastern Montana. Should we be looking at this, or is this just adding to the problem that we're talking about?
Look, I think there's no question that the coal that we have here in the United States, Montana, other states here in this part of the country, as well as back east too, are important resources. There's no question that that's important to the transition economy going forward, but I think the key word there is transition. If we continue with business as usual, if we continue to produce power in the dirty way from coal that we did it 100 years ago, then that's exactly the business as usual that's gotten us into the predicament that we're in with not thinking creatively about energy at this point. So I think we've got to continue using coal. I think we've got to put a lot of work into researching possibilities for cleaner coal generation, carbon capture and storage. Some of the liquefaction research is promising, but it's got to be part of a broader mix. And I think really the key here that we can do is we can focus on electrification of the transportation grid. And I think when we do that, we're more easily able to transition among different sources to generate that electricity, be it coal or be it some of the other resources that Montana is blessed with, wind power, potentially hydro, geothermal, biomass. So Montana actually has the choice going forward to develop the coal, but also to develop some of these 21st century technologies.
It sounds almost futuristic, I guess I would say, and it probably is to a certain degree, because we're talking about something we're not exploiting enough right now,
right,
or developing enough right now. You, I think, had the occasion to visit one example of this, a wind farm here.
Exactly.
How much energy can we generate from these so-called alternative sources?
I think we could probably in the next 15 years triple the amount of energy that's coming out of the so-called renewable energy sources, and over the longer term increase that even more, especially as we start looking at technologies that allow us to drill deep into the Earth's crust with advanced drilling techniques, some of it from the oil industry, ironically enough, and start using some of that heat to produce electricity. That's one way, but as I said before, Don, it isn't any one silver bullet that we've got to explore. And the most important thing is we've got to look at these energy sources and energy technologies on a level playing field. We've got to honestly evaluate what are the costs, what are the benefits, and what are the risks of each of these alternatives, and let the market forces decide what the best paths to go. And I think that by creating a policy framework in Washington and at the state level where you actually put a price on carbon, but you do it in a way that reduces the impact on people, on families, on businesses, to transition, because you can envision 20, 30 years down the road an America that is cleaner, more secure, and much more prosperous because we have chosen to transition off the old ways of powering our economy and our lifestyle and our national power to a new way that is much more in control by us, that is much more prosperous, and creates the kind of environment that we want to leave for our children and grandchildren.
And I would agree with you that somehow gelling this all around the concept of national security might be the path to get there, to get over the objections and the political divisiveness, but that's still a big gap to bridge, given the current climate.
There's no question that it's a major challenge, Don. But I would say it's like this. During the Cold War, we had the recognition thrust upon us that we had an external enemy. There was a group, there was an ideology, there was a country that had the weaponry and the know-how and the ability to destroy us, and that they wanted to do it. I think it's the realization that we're in a similar position, but with a different set of adversaries and a different set of challenges. Some of them are not human challenges, they're natural challenges, or they're phenomena that are challenges. But if we can get to that same point of recognition, then we'll do what we did in the Cold War, which is America will just, hitch up its britches and put our nose to the ground and actually start making the investments that we have to make so that 50 years, it's going to be a long process. You know, I'm not telling you we're going to win this thing next year, or even in this administration or the next one, but we're going to come out on top in the long run. As the Admiral said, we're going to be a cleaner economy, we're going to lead the world. There's a market out there for this stuff. Why should America be lagging behind, still doing things in the old-fashioned way, when there are folks out there who are willing to step up and compete?
All right, when we return, I want to briefly address the issue of what other countries may or may not be doing,
Right,
and how that affects us. We'll be back after the break.
The Dunwell Report continues.
The discussion is about energy and national security, something close to home for all of us and something that we all care deeply about. But I've got one question for you. The U.S. could overnight transform the way that it approaches this and try to do a lot of things. I'm not saying it's going to happen that way, but we could do that. But we would still have the Chinas, the Indias, and other major parts of the world which right now are heavily dependent upon fossil fuel energy and which aren't about to go along with us just because it's a great idea. What do we do about that?
all of those countries, especially China and India, have very large populations, very densely packed in urban areas. They have environmental problems that are brewing that make ours look minuscule in comparison. They are starting to get it. One of the greatest producer these days of clean energy technology, for example, is China. At the same time they're building out their coal-fired electrical system, they are recognizing that the future, the long-term future, lies in clean, sustainable energy. We have the opportunity in this country to develop the technology, to deploy it in our own country, to export it to countries like India and China and other places that will need more energy, and we can do it in a clean, sustainable way, in a very, very economically prosperous way.
So here's an opportunity for us to actually export the other way instead of all the importing that we're doing. How realistic do you feel that is?
I think it's very real. I think we've got to make the investments now, but I'm reminded of the auto sector where, amazingly, this is something that just boggles the mind. Detroit invented every major automobile efficiency and reliability technology of the last half century, but was consistently, without exception, the last to implement it at the production line. The Japanese would do it, the Koreans would do it, the Germans would do it, and we would sit back, the inventors of these technologies, whether you're talking about dual overhead cam engines, these engine management computer systems, heck, hybrid cars. We invented the hybrid drive system. GM made an electric car before anyone else did. We invented all these things, but then we didn't use them. So I'm certain that we can do it. And I'm certain that those new technologies that are out there, we don't even know the names of them yet. We Americans will come up with them. The question is, will we bring them to market? And that's about political will.
Don, I would like to prove Winston Churchill wrong in terms of energy security and climate security, national security. Winston Churchill said, Americans will always do the right thing after they've tried everything else. So I'm saying let's prove Winnie wrong, and let's go ahead and do the right thing starting right now based on good scientific evidence and good national security common sense.
15 seconds. What should the average American do?
Let your elected official know that we need a policy that's going to move America forward in terms of energy and national security.
All right, gentlemen. Thank you both very much for this lively discussion and enlightening discussion. We'll be back with some closing thoughts after the break.
The Dunwell Report continues.
Our need for energy is colossal. Our dependence upon foreign sources of energy is enormous. Now, few would argue against changing that formula of dependence, but it takes more than words. It requires strong leadership, will and resolve, and viable alternatives. It won't be cheaper without cost, but the cost of doing nothing will be even greater. All right, I want to thank our guests, and of course I want to thank you, our viewers. We'd like to hear your thoughts and what you'd like to hear on this weekly show, what you like and what you don't like. And until our next Montana Newsmaker, I wish you good luck and Godspeed. And thank you.
Thank you, Don.
Thanks, Don.